Hello and welcome to this IDC, NetApp and VMware webinar on the topic of key strategies for a successful hybrid cloud. My name is Carla Arendt and I head up IDC's cloud research for Europe, and I will take you through today's topic. But before we get started, there are some housekeeping items that I would like to share with you. So throughout the webinar, you can submit your questions through the Q&A engagement tool, and we will capture all the questions. We will attempt to answer them live throughout the webinar, but if there's anything we are unable to cover, we will follow up afterwards. If you feel that your slides are behind, you can push the F5 button on your keyboard and it will refresh the page. The help engagement tool that you can see has answers to the most common technical issues that you could encounter. All the materials are available in the resource list. And you can see a replay of this webinar using the same link that you used to register. So with the housekeeping out of the way, it is my pleasure to also introduce my co-hosts for today. First of all, Lee, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, hi, thanks so much for having me. And Lee Caswell, VP Marketing for VMware, coming to talk about how we're working together in some really interesting new spots. So thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Lee. And I'm also joined by Phil. Would you like to introduce yourself as well, please?
Yeah, thanks, Carla. Yeah, I'm Phil Bretherton. I'm Vice President of Solutions and Alliances at NetApp, and I've been working with Lee and VMware for, I think, 15 years now. So it's really fun to look at where we're heading in the next 5 to 10 years.
Great. Thank you very much. And we have put together a very interesting agenda for you today, because after a short presentation on the topic of hybrid cloud, we are going to talk about 3 different topics. First of all, how to build an efficient hybrid cloud. Then secondly, how to modernize your applications using containers. And then the third topic is how you can unlock your data through enterprise-ready AI. And I'm sure we're going to have a lively discussion around these topics and hopefully raise a lot of interesting perspectives for you as well. But first of all, I wanted to bring us all on the same page by introducing the IDC vision on how digital infrastructure is going to evolve in the next 5 to 10 years. We are seeing that all technology or all IT infrastructure is going to look and feel like a cloud. But that doesn't mean that it's all going to be in the public cloud, but it actually means that regardless of where you run and operate your IT infrastructure, you're going to run it and operate it like a cloud. So that's what we call cloud-centric technology. We also expect that IT infrastructure is going to become more and more autonomous, so that you can automate a huge part of the IT operations. And we are moving away from manual tasks and to really hyper automation. And then another very important element of the digital infrastructure is ubiquitous deployment. And that means that you can develop your applications anywhere, so on premises or in a public cloud, but you can also deploy them anywhere. And it's not really about where you develop it, but really that you develop applications that can use infrastructure as a code. And that will give you consistent resilience, but also the opportunity to continuously enhance your IT infrastructure and then to optimize your resources. And that is the vision for what a digital infrastructure in the future will look like. And with that very short introduction, we are jumping right into the first discussion point, and that is how to build an efficient hybrid cloud. And that is a very important topic because if we look at where infrastructure and applications and data are being run at the moment, then you can see that it's still largely on premises. We have more than 60% of organizations who have a preference for on-prem IT. And only 2% of organizations are at the other end of the spectrum and have a preference for running exclusively on the public cloud. So that means that the majority of organizations are actually running a mixed infrastructure that consists of on-premise and hybrid and public cloud elements that they need to run in an efficient way. And the most efficient way to operate this mixed infrastructure is actually by operating it as a hybrid cloud. And if we look at where especially business applications are being run today and how they're being delivered, then again, we see that they are still mostly delivered from on-premises, but 23% of organizations deliver their business applications today in a hybrid cloud model, and 9% of organizations use a public cloud. And we expect that these 65% of organizations who are still delivering their core business applications from their own data center, they will move into a hybrid cloud environment, because that is a much more efficient and flexible and scalable way of delivering these business applications. But it has taken them a long time, because these are the most important applications of the organization. So there's also a certain risk associated with moving them out of the on-prem environment. And with that, I would actually like to invite Lee already to give your perspective onto the topic of hybrid cloud.
Yeah, terrific. You know, I think it's interesting when you think about how VMware and NetApp worked together in the very first days, right? It was getting let's call it a persistent store of record, right? As we were virtualizing servers. And now what you're going to find is we actually have a similar engagement as we're providing a similar, single point of storage reference as we start virtualizing clouds, right? And how does that work? Well, here's what's happening inside of our companies today, right? We've got certainly a very strong and vibrant on-prem environment, but we've got ad hoc environments going into public clouds that are normally done around speed of deployment, right? And what we found, right, is there is an opportunity to have very fast level application development using public cloud properties. But now what we're finding is that different lines of business, right, are operating independently. And so the multi-cloud architecture starts where you've got independent lines of business, almost shadow IT, we've called this in the past, right? And then what happens is you start building up these centers of excellence. Now for economics and security, what happens is you start thinking, well, listen, I need this organization for this cloud and this one for this cloud. And I've got my on-prem team at the same time. And there's the edge coming out as well, right? So what we're finding, right, is that this latest, development path, right, then is to say that we have a integrated multi-cloud strategy, which is what I hope it says on your right-hand side up in the top corner there. And that multi-cloud strategy is around this. It's about how do you get operational efficiencies that transcend individual clouds. So as we're finding our cloud, basically customers are doing more than one cloud, then what you find is you got to have a consistent operating model. That means the same security model. And we all know that storage, right, and data become core to this methodology, so that you've got a way to have data be coexistent across the hybrid cloud. Let's move to Phil.
Yeah, Lee, it's really true that if you look back over the history of NetApp and VMware working together, when we first started, a lot of what we were doing was doing like vMotion between data centers. And it took us all a lot of work to get all our technologies built onto the big three clouds, onto Amazon, Google. Independently, we had to do that work, right? And so, like, for example, teams I worked with spent a lot of time getting ONTAP ported well to the big three clouds. It's actually right now is the time where it's coming together that VMware has built out your cloud strategy, NetApp's got our cloud strategy, and we can take now the integrations together. And what this means to customers, there definitely are customers doing integrated hybrid cloud today. There's a good example at a company I like to talk about called Heidelberg Cement. It's a 50,000 person, it's a huge cement company. It sounds like a nice small company. It's a huge cement materials company. It's actually very advanced in technology. They're one of the leaders in driving down CO2 emissions of the cement industry, which is a big contributor to CO2. They're with NetApp and VMware are doing a hybrid cloud with Azure for DR. And so what they've done is you're integrating the workflows across the VMs, across the storage, getting the advantages of what NetApp can do with efficient data movement, putting it up with the advantages of VMware on the VM movement, and then integrating it so you can maintain security, compliance, do things like policy-based management. All those things become feasible. And I really want to say, I think I've been doing this a long time. It's really, now is the time. It's come together where the technology is really right to start implementing at scale. So exciting times, Lee.
Yeah, and that multi-cloud element, the fact that we're all, both of us together, right, are working with all of the major hyperscalers, right, gives us the opportunity now to present a multi-cloud strategy, right? You've got this consistent operating model. And this is, what's helping customers start thinking, hey, how do I manage this when I've got applications, right, that would run across these different cloud properties? And of course, like data becomes core to this, right? Thinking about where's the data, where's it located, how do I manage that over time?
Yeah, and then just to speak to the NetApp, the people who are familiar with NetApp, what this means technically is your Snap Mirrors work, your cloning works, your cloning integrated up into your VMs works. All those things that you're used to doing on-prem can now be done exactly the same way on the public clouds. And then because of VCF, because of VMware's Cloud Foundations management and all the plugins we do into that can be managed as a common pool. Last thought on this, and it's exciting that it's not just NetApp and VMware, by the way. It takes us working with Amazon. It takes us working with Google. It takes us working with Microsoft, both directly and together to make all of this technology work for our customers.
And for the next chapter, what you find is Kubernetes becomes extremely important. And I know Carla's going to lead us into that, right? New applications.
Yep, exactly. That's so true.
Thank you very much for sharing this perspective. It really sounds like you're already enabling customers to take big steps towards this digital infrastructure future, because you enable this unified operating model across all of the IT infrastructure, all the way into the public cloud, which is great. If we look at the second topic that we wanted to discuss, that is modernizing applications with containers and moving into the Kubernetes world. And just to kick us off here, I would like to share the most applied strategies that organizations are using. So we asked 925 organizations which cloud migration strategies they are using. And you can see that 20% of organizations are doing a straight lift and shift onto infrastructure as a service. But 24% of organizations are actually modernizing their applications before moving them onto infrastructure as a service. And another 11% refactor and re-architect their applications and go straight to platform as a service. And the interesting shift that we've seen here is that organizations are moving on from a straight lift and shift into this modernize first and then move into infrastructure or platform as a service. And this modernize piece, that is actually very often about containerizing the applications before moving them onto the public cloud. If we then look at what percentage of applications customers or enterprises are currently running in containers, then you can see that the 41% of organizations are running between 10 and 25% of their applications in containers today. So there's still a long way to go in terms of moving applications into containers. But organizations know that this is a step on the way that they need to take and are really working towards that. So I would like to invite you again, Lee, to share your perspective about how organizations can modernize their applications with containers.
Thanks so much. Yeah, so what we found in the early days, right? I mean, there were some folks early on that thought, wow, containers are going to be the end of VMware, kind of an existential threat almost, right? Of, hey, how containers were almost disaggregating an app and app development itself. Well, what we found though, right, was this, right? Containers are about the speed of development, right? Being able to develop apps more quickly, really, containers helped with that. But what we found was that it was different, complementary to the need for resilient infrastructure underneath, right? And so most containers were running in VMs, it turned out, right? And we certainly have a great, vibrant experience with that with OpenShift, for example, right? And then most recently, right, VMware has introduced Tanzu, which is integrating Kubernetes. So Kubernetes is the orchestration layer, if you will, and integrating that directly into vSphere itself. And this is really important. I encourage folks to really look at what we integrate in the hypervisor, because it's not easy, by the way. But when you do that, and when we do that, right, what it does is it gives you the most performant, resource efficient, and single management solution. And so we've taken this app transformation element really seriously, because what we're finding is that every business is a software business now. Heidelberg Cement, right? I mean, 50 years ago, probably not. Today, it is. And so what you're finding, right, is the need to have new applications, right? Really critical here. And so if you think about that speed, that's containers. If we build this out, Carla, right, and look next, right, it's about how to build and run at the same level. We talked about this common multi-cloud architecture, right? And don't forget about the edge, right? As you think about the edge, whether it's a telco edge or the fact that the burgeoning IoT edge, right, turns out sensors can generate data faster than people. So we've got a huge amount of data going to be sourced right at the edge, and we'll need to be locating right our compute infrastructure close to that. And finally, last here, right, is if you think about with 76% of our customers doing app transformation, 26% going under cloud transformation, the idea is how are we together helping customers move more quickly? And this is always the case, right, is how do I move, retain the expertise that I have already and leverage that into the future without giving everything up? That's what you're finding our companies are doing together with joint customers. Phil, I'll turn it over to you.
Back one, Carla. There you go. And actually, Carla's statistics are interesting. From IDC statistics, that's kind of what we're seeing when we look at how our controllers run different servers and container workloads. And we see the statistics actually that are pretty similar, Carla, to what your data is coming for the organizations as a whole. And then generally older apps are less containerized, more about VMs, sometimes bare metal. And the newer apps are the ones that we see containerized. And same strategy that VMware employed. We focused on Kubernetes. We have a plugin we refer to as Astra Control Center, so that you can get, as you get into containers, especially containers with persistent data, there's a lot of compliance requirements, data protection requirements, standard things that we do on VMs that you have to do on containers now. And the trick to this, again, is connecting up into, like Tanzu, connecting up into the management environment that the customers want to use and giving them data compliance that's triggered off of the upper level infrastructure. That's how you enable, Carla, what you were talking about at the very beginning, I think you called it hyper automation or a term like that, but that's how you get the automation with the policies down at the storage tier to work right. So we're again, deeply engaged on our own projects under this umbrella term Astra, and then working with Lee and the VMware team to plug that up into Tanzu and make it work again across cloud. Like another technology, I'd say, where you're looking, when people think about how important is VMware to NetApp, Lee, a good statistic I use is about half our controllers have VMware servers attached to them out in the entire fleet. And this is the first time I've ever talked to Lee, and he's quiet. You're on mute, Lee. Sorry, it was a cheap joke.
Sorry about that.
We and I have known each other a long time. The number's about 10% on containers. Go, Lee.
Well, what's interesting about containers, right, is unlike VMs, which are fairly like fixed, you set up a VM, right, and it lasts for, a year or more, right? I mean, it's a very, important element, but not changing all of the time, right? There are things we could do through vMotion and DRS that allow that flexibility. But what's interesting on containers, right, is containers are basically being spun up, destroyed, shared across the hybrid cloud more frequently. And there's no inherent like security model for this, right? Orchestration layer. So the ability to provide the same policy-based management, right, that allows you to go and manage, monitor, and that hyper automation that you mentioned, right? Think about it this way, right? Being able to look at all of your performance elements from a container out view instead of trying to do it from the outside in, there's really a factor of that speed that we talked about, right? So yeah, great opportunity for us to work together, and you can see customers basically bridging these worlds with our help.
Sure can. Also, we're about to jump into talking about AI. And one of the places we see containers used the most is in artificial intelligence use cases. So I'll use that as a jumping point to you, Carla.
Great. Thank you very much, Phil and Lee. And so let's get to our third topic, unlocking your data through the enterprise-ready AI. And the reason why AI is so important is because we see this tremendous data growth, and we have seen it for many years, but it just keeps accelerating. And one of the contributing factors to that is the increased investment into edge technologies and solutions. So we have been asking organizations for several years on how their IT infrastructure budgets are developing and how they are spending their IT infrastructure budgets. And as you can see, this year, organizations said that they are spending 31% of their budgets on the core data center. And that is down from 43% 2 years ago. So the portion of spend that is dedicated to the core data center is decreasing over time, slowly but steadily. And the difference is going into public cloud, which is slowly but surely growing, but also into edge, which is actually growing quite explosively. So 2 years ago, it was only 9% of the budget that went to edge solutions. And this year, it's already 17%. So we see this explosive growth on the edge. And it's not just in terms of IT budgets, but it's even more so in terms of data generation and also data analytics. So with that, Lee, I would like to invite you back in to give you.
Yeah, as you think about that, right? For companies that are just hardware companies, right? I mean, this could be scary, right? But for companies like us, and both of our companies consider a large portion of our value in software, right? And so as you think about that, right, the ability to go and be relevant in this public cloud world, right, with is really impressive, and AI is particularly interesting. So let me talk a little bit about that, right? So we've certainly made a lot of customers satisfied with just protecting data, right? What's happening now is customers are looking at ways to get more value out of the data itself. And that's really what artificial intelligence provides. A subset of this, by the way, is called machine learning. And within that, you've got some really interesting models. You basically models, gain your data, model it, and then train your system. That's called inferencing. And then you've basically got a wrapped system, right? That's requiring an intense amount of processing power. And it turns out that, one of the leaders in this space, NVIDIA, that developed GPUs, that were very good at like graphics rendering, turned out to be very good at parallel processing. And this is one of the things you're going to find, right? Is, both of us will talk about our partnership here with NVIDIA, because what we're doing is we're helping customers. So whether it's language recognition, we saw this probably 10 years ago. Remember, Phil, OCR, right? On, object character recognition, right? Sure. Moved to like text to speech, to natural language processing, right? The amount of things you can do to give a better customer experience. This is what we're finding, right? So to be able to do like natural language processing, conversational AI, these are really interesting ways for industries of all types. Medical imaging has been completely revolutionized, including COVID research, by the way, recently, right? So a lot of abilities to go and apply machine learning into the medical community. And last, right, in whether it's retail or manufacturing environments, the ability to take large data sets and look for fraud detection. One of the ones you've probably seen recently is just like automated checkout systems, right? Making sure like, you're scanning items, right? You've got the right barcodes on things and doing like detection along those lines. I mean, these are ways to go and help businesses scale, and particularly in a contactless environment, these become exceptionally important. And so, we see some of these new applications. And Phil, I think for customers everywhere, you're seeing the implications of this, whether you're, watching TV or, attending a retail, going to
Lee, just to personalize this for a moment, I like to do endurance sports. So I have power meters and heart rate monitors and all this jazz that you hear about. And all of that ends up in a data lake somewhere, right? And in theory, we haven't gotten to this point yet, but in theory, you can apply some artificial intelligence to this pools of data coming off my personal network, if you will, and then give me recommendations on how to train better and things, rather than having to go to a human coach who has to pour through all that data. And this is coming. It's just the cost and sort of complexity of doing it is still a little bit too much for that use case. But when you look at these use cases you're talking about, or insurance underwriting is another big area use of AI right now. It's providing very big business benefits right now. Yeah,
the amount of data coming out of this, right, which is stunning. when you think about it,
And
right?
as you said, only getting bigger. Real quickly on the, because I'm a storage person, I will mention, oftentimes people think of NetApp as a file company or block and file company from a storage point of view. When you're looking at AI, start thinking about NetApp as an object company as well, because it's a very interesting use case where a lot of the data is coming in new apps that are expecting S3 is the protocol, object protocol. And then you have to be able to move it often into NFS, often into file storage and back and forth comfortably. That's sort of the starting point of how do you deal with this massive inflow of data and then put it into the AI tools and then circle it back out to the edge. This is a very fast moving and very important part of, I think, everyone in the webinar, all our jobs, how to use AI most effectively is going to be a competitive advantage in all our companies.
It almost looks like tiering by protocol type, right? In some level, right?
I think of it as a data pipeline, to be honest, because you've got those large amounts of data coming in and you have to sort through it and then process it effectively to turn it into a useful algorithm that then you push back out to the edge devices usually. So it's sort of this pipelining of data.
Yeah, so you got different latency characteristics, right? About
all through,
and also, what you're finding, right, is you can't move all the data, right? Just basic data gravity, right? Means that you're going to have this interesting loop, I think, particularly when you engage the edge, right? About thinking of how do I get new data? How do I provide inferencing on it? And then how do I retrain a model, for example, right? And what does that look like, that interactive process of sharing your results, checking those results, right? And then coming back to refine things over time. So we'll show a little bit in the next slide here about how we're jointly working to build a stack, right, that makes AI ready for the enterprise. And so, this part, the blue part here is, pretty familiar to everybody, right? This is where VMware's value to the IT administrator, along with working with, and I'll start with leading storage providers. We'll get to NetApp in just a second. So you basically take, on-demand Kubernetes is new, intrinsic lifecycle management, live migration, right, and load balancing. These are all the aspects, right, that meant VMware value over bare metal instances was completely consistent with meeting SLAs and the management constraints, right, of an enterprise environment. Now, if you build onto this and show with NVIDIA, we've been building and helping them get to certified systems, right, that take their GPUs and upcoming by basically smart NICs and DPUs. This is a way to offload traditional CPUs from infrastructure management, distributed firewalls, and you'll see this coming on probably later on here, where you'll have this new distributed architecture. That element now is complemented by the work that NetApp's been doing with NVIDIA. If you build this out one more time, and Phil, maybe you want to talk a little bit about your relationship with NVIDIA and how this has been working.
Yeah, we started working with NVIDIA, think it as a bare metal, so GPUs, bare metal, back about 5 years ago. And what we were trying to do, basically you have to feed the data at a very high rate of speed to get them up to your GPUs and all the tools that are driving the AI models above the GPUs. And then from a data management point of view, typically these models have a lot of compliance requirements and data protection requirements, it turns out, because if you think about a simple case is like the automated car, where you go, if there's an accident, you have to be able to go back and show how you made your decisions in building the model that was part of the AI that was actually deployed at the edge in the car. Or underwriting insurance, you have to be able to do the same thing. So there's a lot of data management, copy keeping, and all that kind of jazz that we're very good at with our snapshots and things that we do. And then the other key thing we found is, and I know you're going to talk about this in 1 second too, is that the people who build AI tools don't really want to know about their storage. As much as I love storage, they don't seem to love it quite as much as I do. So they don't want to learn everything. Yeah, everyone does. I've heard. My wife tells me the same thing. So anyway, they don't want to know all these deep, detailed tools that some of our storage administrator customers want to know. And so we built a set of tools, basically, that work right with their Jupyter notebooks and things like that. So all they have to do is say, take copies. They don't have to know all the details I'm talking about, how it works.
Well, because a lot of that was designed around speed, right? Hey, I need to go do this project, right? I want to do this. And so bare metal turned out to be like a pretty fast way to go and deploy that, and I could do it outside of the data center and line of business sort of things. But you found that
they were pretty big projects, though. You're going to get to
Yeah.
this, but these are pretty big projects, because when you're talking about big NetApp storage and big DPU servers, you're talking about hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars just of infrastructure. So your projects
Yeah.
are pretty big, and you guys are bringing this to a much broader audience, I think, with the work you're doing with.
One thing I'll mention, right, is that, and one of the elements was performance, right? So there was questions around, hey, can I get the same performance in a virtualized environment that I can get in a not, in a bare metal environment? So this is some of the work that we did jointly with NVIDIA. So this is raw engineering at the hypervisor level, right? To make sure that there was virtually no impact of running GPUs in a virtual environment, and not only being able to share them, this is, vGPUs you've seen for years, right? But something called a multi-instance GPU. And that means you can carve up a GPU and get consistent performance through each one of those individual slices, if you will, right? So it almost eliminates the noisy neighbor. Remember the noisy neighbor issue, right? Yeah. So it takes the noisy neighbor issue out. So that gives you predictable performance out of each GPU in a shared manner. So you've got this really interesting ROI method. And then on top of that, through our work with NVIDIA, they've launched a software pack called the NVIDIA AI Enterprise. And what this gives you now is a set of tools, right? These are basically AI data science, they're data framework support tools, inference servers, and the ability to go and deploy modeling and do that together with a package. Now, this package is available exclusively for VMware in virtualized environments. And so this is a way that, if we basically look at the left-hand side of this chart, Carla, it's basically bridged that data scientist developer into the IT administrator. And that's the work that we're doing together. Now it takes a village to launch an AI enterprise system, it turns out, right?
It does.
But the essence at the end, right, is that what you've got is the ability to deploy confidently with low risk and give you an SLA, right, which is really, we think, key to driving AI mainstream.
And then just one thing to add on this is this architecture, you can buy it and run it yourself. So all you people that have data centers and things and want to buy this yourself, it's built to be consumed that way. It's also for service providers. So we've got a service that we've built known as Base Command Platform with NVIDIA, where you can essentially, we joke about calling it rent the Lamborghini, is because it's a full-on SuperPod, high performance AI environment that you can rent on a pay-as-you-go basis.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
And so I look at this, Lee, and I'm like, man, you just slide the VMware pieces in and keep that bare metal performance, but what would you call it? The GPU carving technologies.
Multi-instance.
Multi-instance. You add that, and you just extend the use cases of this in both whether you're doing it consumption based or procuring more typically.
It kind of harks back to the days. I don't know if you remember when like VMware first started with vSphere. We used to call the first applications we called crapplications, right? It was basically like DHCP servers, print servers, file servers, right? And people were like, oh yeah, that makes sense, but not databases. Like, that would be performance, right? So I'm not going to do that. Right. And then until all of a sudden people are like, what would it look like if I ran this, right? And so through performance optimization, we were able to show that, hey, you can run databases like really fast on vSphere. And then all of a sudden it became, listen, I'm going to run everything that I can possibly run in a virtualized environment because I get this management simplicity factor, right? And the ability to have maintenance. I mean, all of those elements now we're bringing into the AI world. So it's, really, really exciting, I think.
Yeah, I was telling Lee another time that I think this is 1 + 1 + 1 with NVIDIA, NetApp, and VMware, where the result for the market for our customers is like 10, because it really lets you scale from fairly cost-effective, small. I definitely wouldn't call these crap applications, but small applications to very, very large on common infrastructure. Right. It's massive simplicity in operations to be able to do that. So I'm super excited about this. One's very new. We're probably a year into this now, together, 6 months into it. It's very exciting work where this is going.
Yeah, you can start looking at how it bridges not only the worlds of AI into the enterprise, but it also brings a container element. Most of these tools are container based. So having Kubernetes support for that is important. And then the idea that, hey, how do I go and like do maybe modeling in the public cloud, but inferencing at the edge, right? Inferencing wants to be more portable because you want to move that inferencing software close to where the data is being generated, right? And so the idea of you've got this hybrid multi-cloud world evolving, becomes a really simplifying assumption for our customers. Because what we're finding, I think you're finding this too, right? Is customers want to spend less time worrying about the infrastructure elements. They want us to take care of that. And they then want to basically redirect their efforts towards applications that are going to, create competitive, advantage.
Yeah, I totally agree. This AI enterprise platform sort of pulls together everything we've talked about for the last half hour, Lee. It's got the public cloud aspects to it. It's definitely a heavy use of containers, and you need the vendors like us to work together to simplify the environment so the customers don't have to.
Yeah, Carla, what do you think?
No, I think it's great because it actually lives up to the vision that I presented at the very beginning, where the digital infrastructure is highly automated so that people don't need to spend time on managing it manually, and that frees up a lot of resources to direct the people towards creating value for the organization through the use of AI tools. So I think it fits perfectly with that vision.
Yeah, great.
Right. So thank you for that. Just a few pieces of advice for our listeners. So plan for a hybrid cloud future, because as far as we can predict the future, it looks like that hybrid cloud is going to be the dominant architecture for the digital infrastructure. And then be ready to pursue data-driven innovation. And I know that as an industry, we've been trying to do that for several years, but now actually we have the tools to do that and to build this data-driven innovation and data-driven future. So now is really the time to accelerate on that front. And when you're doing that, seek out long-standing and deeply invested partners who can help you and who have built these integrated solutions so that you don't have to integrate them, but you can use something that already works out of the box. So with that, thank you very much to Lee and Phil for your very insightful comments. And also thank you very much to our listeners for today's webinar.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks, Carl. Thanks, everyone.